Welcome to Books Are Fun, a podcast produced by the Somerset Library here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm your host, Shauna Weiss. I'm one of the library technicians here at the library. First, let me tell you a little bit about us. We're a public library with a focus on children's materials. We serve a large number of families. We have over 4,000 books, 1,000 DVDs, and 250 CDs in our collection. We also subscribe to a number of magazines and have many online resources available to our patrons. Lastly, we put on a lot of programs for kids. My personal favorite is the Children's Storytime, which we offer 4 times per week. One issue we've had lately is the lack of diversity in the representation of families in our books. In particular, we have noticed a lack of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and two-spirited family members portrayed in children's books. As a public library, we want to be inclusive of all types of families. We want the kids who read our books to be able to see themselves and their families represented in books. As well, we have a mission of inclusivity in our library, so that all patrons can read books with diversity in them. We all benefit when we live in a more inclusive world. As the saying goes, the beauty of our differences begins with our right to belong. We want all kids to feel like they belong at the library. I've come across some books that I think will be a great addition to our library. They are a series of 4 picture books called the Rainbow Families series. Each book highlights a different family and tells a bit about their experiences. The stories are from real families, and there are photographs for each book. The books were produced by Out Saskatoon, which is located in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Out Saskatoon is a non-profit agency that builds community for LGBTQ2 people of all ages and backgrounds. They provide peer support and counseling, queer-specific education and resources, outreach, social gatherings and events, community referrals, and sexual health services. In addition, they operate Pride Home, a long-term home for LGBTQ youth ages 16 to 21. Today, we are so lucky to be able to talk to the director of Out Saskatoon, Rachel Loewen-Walker. Or do you go by Rachel Walker? I don't know.
Loewen-Walker.
Okay, Rachel Loewen-Walker.
Yeah.
And I will add that she is my sister, so therefore she is an extra special guest. Welcome to you, Rachel.
Thank you.
And thank you
for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being on Books Are Fun today. So let's get started with our conversation. Rachel, can you explain a little bit, just briefly, about what Out Saskatoon does?
So Out Saskatoon is an LGBT community center, and we've been around for 26 years, and we focus on support services through counseling, support groups in the evenings in a drop-in center, education through going out to schools, elementary, high school, and post-secondary, and also educating businesses and corporations in the community. And then we also now focus on housing, so providing long-term housing to LGBTQ youth.
Okay, so lots of different things.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome. So for these Rainbow Families series of books, the 4 books, how did you decide to make them? Like, whose idea was it to make them, and how did they come about?
You know, it just came from, I think, from our education program, which there are some good books out there, but there aren't enough. Mm-hmm. And we wanted, especially in the education we were doing with elementary schools, we wanted some books that we could use for that education that reflected the families in our community. And so we thought, why don't we create our own? Mm-hmm. So that's where the idea came from.
Okay. And were these families already part of your community center? Like, were they part of some of the groups that you had, or were they friends of people, or who were these people that were part of the books?
Yeah, so what happened was, we got a grant from the Saskatoon Community Foundation to make the books. And then we reached out to our community to find a volunteer to help do the editing and layout of the books. Mm-hmm. And And so with her, we tracked down families in the community that were willing to share their stories. And so two of the families were people that we already were working with in the center, and then two were connections made through our volunteers.
Okay, cool. And and they're actual photographs, right? Like photographs of the families. And they're kind of like they have some kind of effect done to the photos. You can't, I don't know, they don't look as much like photos, or they're, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. And that was decided. They all were happy to be a part of it and proud to be in the book series, but that was just to kind of keep it a little bit more confidential, especially because kids were involved as well in the photos. Oh. But a local photographer took all the photos, and then we used, it's called just a cartoon effect on photos.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And also it makes it appealing to kids, is what we thought, is that it would make it interesting for kids to read. Yeah.
Okay, so do you see a lack of LGBTQ2 people portrayed in children's books generally?
It's a good question. I think that there's definitely been a huge increase, but probably still not enough given the actual diversity that's out there. We have lots. At Out Saskatoon, we order pretty much every new children's book that has LGBT characters in it. We order so that we can have them as resources. But I think in the grand scheme of things, there's still a lack.
And do you think it's important for kids to have children's books portraying families that look like their own families? And why? And why would it be important?
Yeah,
or is it important?
I think it definitely is. And the interesting thing about that is that for the most part, for the general population, they do have books that portray families that look like theirs. I think what's really valuable about books that portray diverse families is that it shows families that don't look like ours, so that we can better understand each other. And so it's important for that little boy that has two mommies to read a book about a kid with two mommies, but it's also important for a kid that has opposite sex parents to read about same sex parents.
Right, because it's important for us all to be inclusive and
then children's books, especially for that age range. I mean, children's books now, there are more of them that show gender diverse kids, because kids are coming out as trans younger and younger, and so there's lots of books out there that just show kids being themselves, regardless of their gender at birth, and then that is validating for kids. When, for those kids those little girls that don't want to play with dolls, and those little boys that don't want to wear blue, it's validating for them to see themselves reflected in other gender diverse kids. Yeah,
it's very good. And how can libraries like our little Somerset library here in Winnipeg, how can our libraries support queer families or rainbow families? What can libraries do to make libraries a welcoming place?
Well, I think libraries can definitely do their best to bring in diverse books and progressive books and seek them out, and make a point of bringing them in and featuring them on shelves so that people know that they're there. Yeah. That's a strong show of allyship. There's also been some really fun activities going on in libraries in recent years. One is called Drag Queen Story Time.
Oh, yes.
And we had
that at the Winnipeg Public Library.
Yeah, the Winnipeg Library actually has an advertisement, kind of a handbill that identifies a whole bunch of the gender diverse and children's books that they have, which is really great. It's a great way to show, hey, look, we're being supportive. So Drag King Storytime is a fun way. for kids to interact with, with gender diverse adults. Mm-hmm. And then also recently I saw a great video about a library that hosted a reading because the local school wouldn't let a parent read a story about a gender diverse youth. Because other parents weren't okay with it, but then the library hosted a public screening, and more than 600 people showed up.
Wow!
So libraries are these wonderful public community spaces where often a lot of social kind of change can take place.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other comments about children, books, diversity, families, etc.?
I think that education is always the key in all of our work. We focus really heavily on education, and especially on educating young kids, because they're not as indoctrinated by society, and so kids are so much more. We know that they're so much more open to diversity than a lot of adults, and so it's wonderful to kind of take that opportunity to strengthen that acceptance rather than let them close their minds up.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today. We'll have to wrap it up. I know we could talk all day about this because it's something that we both care about. And thank you for sharing. And if I have any more questions, I will definitely look you up, my sister.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It was a real pleasure.
Okay, great. Thank you. That concludes today's episode on Books Are Fun. We're excited to make our Somerset Library more inclusive by including more books that feature LGBT characters. Join us for our episode next week when we discuss social cataloging and how it may be the future of how we do cataloging in the library. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you next week.